adolescents. I do families and lots of parenting stuff because I work with children and families. I do not see couples and I do not see adults. There is the occasion that I will see an adult when their stuff is in my way. So if their stuff is stopping me from doing what I need to do with their child, I will do quick stuff that we'll talk about too today. So substance abuse as a symptom. For this presentation, I want you to stop thinking about substance abuse the way you currently do. All right, we're going to think about it different. And hopefully this is a better approach to substance abuse that's going to be more successful, right? For you, for your kids, for people that you know with substance abuse. So we're going to do our best to breathe because we got to get here and I got to disconnect from that. So breathe in through the nose to the count of 4. Breathe out through the mouth or your nose to the count of 6. I'm going to count with you. Okay, ready? So get as comfortable as you can. All right, in through the nose, out through the mouth. In, out. In, out. In.
Are you looking for your cards? Yeah.
Out.
I said John.
That's why I came down, because I figured I'm not going to ask.
Okay, so remember to do this with your kids too, right? This is the easiest, best way to help kids self-regulate, to help them manage their own emotions, and they can do it anywhere, and it's free, right? And it's super easy. Okay, so there is a relationship between the increase in depression and anxiety in children and drug use and abuse. Do you guys have any idea what the relationship is? That it's all going up. There's an increase in both of those. The relationship is because of isolation, right? Kids now are more isolated than they actually have ever been, mainly because of technology, right? The isolation, we think because of technology, we're more social, we are more connected, but we're not physically more connected to anybody. We're less connected to people, right? Because we and kids are on their devices more. They might be talking to their friends, but they're talking to their friend in a text who's across the room that they could go to and talk to, right? So that is why there's an increase in depression and anxiety and drug and alcohol use. We need face-to-face communication. We need people. We need community. We need to be together, right? I encourage technology times in houses, right? Specific times that we're gonna allow you to have your device, and times that you don't get to have your device. And even with friends, when they have friends, they can be in a room full of kids and they're all just like this on their phones, right? Still not being together. Okay, drugs and alcohol is the best way to avoid life. Drugs and alcohol is the answer to the problem, right? Drugs and alcohol is the solution. It's the symptom. Drugs and alcohol is the fever when in actuality you have strep throat, right? In all situations, okay? Drugs and alcohol abuse is a symptom. It is their solution, it is the individual solution to whatever the problem is that caused this to be their answer, okay? So, drugs and alcohol is the best way to avoid life. So, you can avoid your own abuse, you can avoid your own sadness, you can avoid your own loneliness, you can avoid, right? This is why you want to have a drink when something hard happens to you in life, right? As adults, we see it all the time. You might do it, something hard happens, and you're like, I need a drink. And the reason you want the drink is to numb and avoid, right? It is the solution in that moment. Now, most of us can have the drink and then move on. Like, we have the drink, the problem doesn't go anywhere. The problem is still there, but for that moment, we get a little reprieve from it, and we'll tackle the issue later, right? Okay. This is not for me. I got this from a drug and alcohol presentation that I went to. So I'm just going to read it to you. It says, did you know that there is a stronger connection between childhood trauma and addiction than there is between obesity and diabetes? 2/3 of addicts report being abused as children. That's huge, right? 2/3 of addicts have reported being abused as children. That means that the war on drugs is a war on traumatized people that just need help. Now, we all have a stereotypical view of what a drug addict looks like and what an alcoholic looks like, right? And I want you to kind of shift that, right? The view should be something more like, this is a child who was traumatized. I know it looks like a grown-up right now, and I know it looks like a teenager, but this is still a child that was traumatized at some point, because their answer to the problem is drugs and alcohol as a way to avoid, okay? So trauma is all relative too. So when I say that there was a trauma in their childhood, it could be abuse, but trauma is relative to the individual person. So if you have 2 kids in your family, you get divorced, right? One of your children sail through it fine, and one of your kids cannot get through it at all. Is stuck, doesn't do well, uses, right? One of your kids might have had a health issue, right? A hearing issue that has, in their mind, has made them different in some way and feels different their whole life, and you have no idea, right? This could be part of it. We met a drug addict, and he was saying that he did rehab, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was even doing celebrity rehab. He spent all this money doing all this rehab and found out when he went to this one therapist, she had him draw his childhood in crayons. And that's when he realized what made it different, what the trauma was. For him, the trauma was a hearing issue when he was little. That was it. Now, what happened, his life was going fine, there was no abuse, there was nothing major that stood out, right? But for him, it was that. He ended up in a car accident. He ended up, one of the people in the car died. He was really injured. He was on pain meds. And he needed to be, right? He ended up having his leg amputated. So he had had several surgeries, and the need for the pain meds was significant, but he never recovered from the pain meds, right? So years later, years of money and treatment, and he goes back to finally his childhood to resolve where it all started. So I know another dad who has kind of the similar story, right? We don't know when the drugs and alcohol has been the solution to the problem. I don't know exactly what it was. I know in my head what I believe it to be, but I don't know for sure. He looked very typical though, as far as when he was strung out. He lost everything. Lost his family, lost his job, got divorced, literally lost the children, right? Ended up in jail. So he was now in the criminal justice system. Has come out of it 7 years clean, right? 7 years he's been without, and then he had some dental work done, right? Who'd have thought? I wouldn't have thought. Now, when I found out that he had dental work done, I went, oh, that was it. That was it. Because there was the need, right, for the pain medicine because of what he had done. But he immediately went back into that pattern of behavior, right? lost his job, ends up back in rehab. Rehab was not as successful as everyone hopes it would have been. Still is doing, he's on the right path. But prior to this, I was saying we need to address the reason. We're still just treating this addiction. We keep treating this addiction as if the addiction in and of itself is the problem. The addiction is just the symptom to the problem. So I'm like, we need to do EMDR. We need you to get through back to whatever that little boy issue was that was not resolved for you, right? Otherwise, I cannot keep these kids safe. The best way for me to keep them safe is for you to stay clean. The best way for me to know that you stay clean is for you to get an EMDR. So, there's been some resistance. We're working on it. It's not me. I don't do adults. But things are going much better, right? So, have you guys heard of EMDR? Okay. EMDR is an acronym for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. It's ridiculous. The name, I mean, we got to come up with a different name because I think it's so dumb. But basically what it is there's a trauma that occurs in your life, right? In the moment that the trauma occurs is how it's stored in the brain. So if the trauma occurred when you were 3, that's how it's stored. It's stored as a 3-year-old in the moment that it occurred, right? So when something else happens in life, because you're not 3, right? Let's say you're 15 or you're 30 or you're 40, something else happens in life that triggers this memory. You do things to avoid it because your response is that of a 3-year-old. The emotions are the same, right? You go back to being 3 when you experience that trigger to the trauma again, okay? This is why we spend most of our lives avoiding the stuff that we don't want to think about, which is those traumas, right? This is how drugs and alcohol becomes the solution or the answer, because it's a way to avoid. So what EMDR does is there's the trauma. We find out what the trauma was, and we move where the trauma is stored in the brain. So, because it's stored exactly as it occurred, right? So through a process of following my hand with your eyes, right? Or tapping on your legs, or putting earbuds on that make a right, left, bing, 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 right? Or holding hand buzzers. Some people follow lights, people do different things, right? That movement actually moves where the trauma is stored in your brain. So it's no longer a trigger. So you get to see this trauma as it exists now that you are an adult, now that you are a 15-year-old, now that you are now you're 10, and the trauma occurred when you were 3, right? You see it now completely different. So the trauma doesn't go away. We don't change it. You don't forget it. We just move it. So you see it as it is currently, right? So when you are not stuck in this 3-year-old memory of the trauma that happened to you, and now you're 30, you can see how this trauma was bad and you hated that happened. But no longer is it interfering with your life, right? So this is why getting back to the trauma that occurred, and remember that trauma is all relative, right, to the person and how they see it. Once you get through that, then all these other things aren't necessary anymore. There isn't the need to avoid with drugs and alcohol. Okay. Drug addiction is a true disease. People will sacrifice everything for it. They will lose their shirt, lose everything. You know it, you've seen it. You know, you might know people who've done it, lost everything and still keep going, right? But I need you to tell your kids the truth about it all. Tell them what you know about stuff, right? Don't protect them from the reality of what drug use is, because it will affect them in some way. There is no one that's not touched by drug addiction or abuse in their lives in some way. And it could be just from afar. It could be through a family member. It could be them. But everyone is touched by this in some way. So, drugs kill brain cells. The brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, right? Interestingly enough, adolescence doesn't end until about 25, right? So we're killing brain cells, they don't grow back, right? They need to know these things. Their brain isn't fully formed until 25. 66% of all drugs come from family and friends. Mainly, they come from your medicine cabinets in the bathroom and your nightstand and over the stove. Lots of kids do not think that prescription drugs are drugs. They don't believe that to be true. This is a prescription, it's not a drug. Boys get high and use to get high or because of peer pressure. Girls use to lose weight, to stay awake, and for peer pressure. So there was a study done. It's called the Rat Park Study. And I do want you to look it up, okay? Because it's called RAT, R-A-T, Park, P-A-R-K. Do the Rat Park TED Talk. And if you just put that in Google, it'll come up, right? It's 15 minutes, it's fantastic. It is really good. I'm gonna tell you what Rat Park Study is. So there was a researcher who did a study with a rat, put a rat in a cage, right? And there were 2 bottles of water. One bottle in the cage was water. The other bottle was heroin, right? So what the rat did was the rat drank the heroin to its death. Like just continued to drink the heroin, okay? So they believe then that that's what happens, right? That when given the choice, they will choose the drug over and over, even to your own demise, right? So somebody else comes in and is like, okay, let's look at this again. So they did another study with it. And they put rats in a little rat park. Like they made a cage with other rats, with toys and tunnels and things for the rats to do. And they put a bottle of water